All right, we have Dr. Tristan Frampton here with us. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Dr. Frampton. Just wondering if we can start out with some biographical details. If you can give us a little bit of information on where you grew up, where you're from, and your musical background.
Sure, yeah. I'm originally from the Chicago area, and I've moved around a little bit. I went to Kirksville, Missouri for my undergrad at Truman State University. And then life took me out to Tucson, Arizona, where I went to University of Arizona for my master's. And then I taught high school for a couple years there, and then life took me back to Missouri. I ended up in Columbia, University of Missouri, where I did my PhD in music education. And then I sort of slowly moved towards St. Louis, and here I am now. I was working for quite a while at what is now the University of Health Sciences and Pharmacy, which is now the umbrella institution for St. Louis College of Pharmacy. Oh. Don't get the wrong idea, I was still teaching music.
Okay.
So it was an interesting place to be making music.
Yeah.
And now I've kind of deviated from that a little bit. And I am over at St. Louis University as an academic advisor for pre-health and pre-law students. I was finding the music side of things to be a little hectic, and all the evening rehearsals wasn't really conducive to having a young family. I have 2 children, so I tried something different, but I still have some musical outlets like this one with Andre that I'm very excited about.
Yeah, awesome. So did your love for music, is that something that you've always experienced, or can you point to something that happened in your life or a certain age where all of a sudden you just developed this love for music or this desire to be involved and to produce music?
Goodness. Yeah, I suppose it's somewhat of a musical family, or at least folks that appreciated music. My dad likes listening to music, but he can't carry a tune in a bucket. My mom was very musical, and she actually worked in a music store when I was growing up. It was called El Rey Music. So I'd hang out there quite a bit. I would go after school. I would be around the music teachers. There'd be guitars all over the walls. I'd be messing around with instruments. I took lessons on and off. And so I think that definitely had an impact on my love of music. But really, it was getting involved in school, and especially in high school, where I found my place in the choral program. So I'd say my high school choir director really inspired me, and things just snowballed from there.
Okay. Sure, yeah, as they do sometimes.
Yeah.
So the music that you're going to be performing in the St. Cecilia concert is sacred music. From your perspective as a performer, is there a difference between performing pieces of sacred music versus, saying, performing a different piece of classical music or singing some pop music?
That's a really interesting question. For me, yes and no.
Okay.
I think I'll start with my no.
Okay.
In that I love making music.
Okay.
I don't really care what it is. I do have certain affinities. I really like Renaissance music. I really like music from that era. Renaissance, Baroque music. I'm a very old soul, I suppose. And so I get the most joy from that. There are some more modern or avant-garde things that I enjoy, but I really like the Renaissance. Yeah. And regardless of whether it is sacred or secular, I still feel like it feeds my soul.
Sure.
But I think sacred music in particular from the Renaissance era, that moves me in a way that maybe other music does not.
Okay.
So I think, kind of that 2-part. I think, if there was any one thing that really feeds my soul more, it's sacred music from the Renaissance.
Okay. Very interesting. So then I ask you the same question from the listener's perspective, and I know you're a listener as well as a performer, but as a listener, is there something unique about experiencing sacred music? Should there be a different sort of engagement versus listening to other pieces of music? Say, put it in the earbuds and listening to the iPad.
Sure. I think it is sort of an interesting experience, depending on one's background with music and the type of music that they've listened to, the type of music that they've been exposed to. I think we appreciate music in different ways. If you are more familiar with modern popular music, for example, but it is different. It's a different sonic experience because of how the music is constructed. Okay. With popular music, you have a melody and supporting instrumentation. With music from the Renaissance, it's a completely different texture. It's what we call polyphony, where instead of things being more horizontally conceived, more chords, everything happening at the same time, we have independent vocal lines that are vertically conceived chords. We have independent vocal parts that are more horizontally conceived. So each of those independent voice parts have their own melodies happening at different times. So it's not just the top part that gets the melody, it gets passed around, it gets handed off, it gets traded in a very complex way. So it's sometimes hard to know what to listen to, but the experience, especially you said, listening, maybe you got earbuds in or something like that, versus being here at St. Anselm in such an incredible acoustic. There's something really moving about that, to experience music that is just ethereal in this incredible acoustic that just resonates and fills the space. I think it lends itself to a very unique and potentially moving experience.
Yeah, so the way that you describe it very beautifully, somebody walks in off the street, hasn't heard anything like this before. What's their way in? What's the place to start really getting the gravity of the experience? What's the entry point, would you say?
Wow, that's a great question. For folks who want to maybe learn more about music of this type, I think there are certain things that help increase understanding. Okay. For example, a lot of times the music is in a different language. We're maybe used to hearing Mass in English, and maybe less familiar with the Latin Mass, right? Sure. Or beyond the Mass ordinary. When we get into the propers or we get into other sacred texts, we'll be even less familiar with that Latin. So being able to understand what the singers are singing, having a translation, looking at that translation and knowing what they're singing, I think helps give somebody a little bit of insight into why the music was composed the way it was, why it sounds the way it does. Beyond that, finding the melody, right? How do we find that melody? And oftentimes, it's that beginning of a piece. You'll have maybe some sort of short motive, some little snippet of melody that may be imitated in other voices later on. So you're listening for that melody to be passed around. Okay. So I think that's sort of a nice kind of gateway into music of that type. Now Renaissance polyphony, that's harder, I believe, to comprehend sometimes without a little bit of extra background, without a little bit of explanation of what you're listening to and preparing the ear. But like I said before, this ethereal music in such a really beautiful acoustic and really beautiful setting, I think has the potential to move anybody, even somebody who has not experienced music of this style before.
Okay, great. I think you've given us some really dense material to chew on, but then also some practical advice on how we might experience this music in a powerful way for ourselves. I'm wondering about, from your perspective, the set that you're going to be performing. Do you have a favorite piece that you're going to be performing in the St. Cecilia concert?
Oh gosh. In a way, it's hard to choose.
Sure. Yeah.
Music of I really love, like I said, I love Renaissance polyphony.
Yeah.
And yes, these pieces are not all created equally. But I think the pieces on the program for this particular concert are very comparable in level of quality. Okay. And so as a singer, where I get the most enjoyment is the challenge of singing music like this. It's high caliber music. It is difficult. It is cognitively challenging, and I love that challenge. And I don't have enough opportunities to make music like this. So when that opportunity arises, that's what I love. I will admit that I have a soft spot for Renaissance masses, for the settings of the mass ordinary. And so I think for me, I really do enjoy singing the parts of the mass ordinary. I say the Sanctus and Benedictus is really rather interesting here. It is somewhat formulaic, to some extent. At that time, when you get to like the Hosanna, and it tends to move a little more. It tends to be a little faster. And this one in particular, you have the Sanctus, which is really rather austere, and then you go into the Hosanna, and it's very exciting and also very challenging, which is very satisfying. You got to really stay on top of it. You have to really, listen and lock in and be very, very accurate and clear in your vocal production, and I think that contrast, going from this austere to this sort of, dare I say, lively moment, I think there's something very satisfying about that.
Beautiful. So we're going to be hearing music from two composers, Francisco Guerrero and Alonso Lobo. Is there a way that we'll be able to tell as listeners whether we're listening to Lobo's music or Guerrero's? Is there something unique about them, the way they put the music together?
Gosh, yeah, that's a tricky question. I think maybe an expert might be able to discern between the two. But here you have these two Spanish Renaissance composers, and there are similarities. I think maybe there are more similarities than differences. I personally am less familiar with the music of Lobo, and only moderately familiar with the music of Guerrero. One composer that I am particularly fond of is Tomás Luis de Vitoria. And I do see similarities there between all three. However, I think the music of Lobo and Guerrero, it's really rather interesting. I think you see more of this sort of spice that comes with dissonance. They really play with dissonance, and it comes back to part of it's that Spanish tradition at the time, and part of it is also this sort of the horizontally conceived lines. these melodic lines, these independent melodic lines. And oftentimes the singers and also the composers favored the melody over the dissonances created between different parts. So sometimes you'll have, for example, a B natural sound because they wanted to create this sort of, I don't know if you'd call it at that time, but leading tone, for lack of a better word, is some sort of cadential figure that gets you to home base, and so you raise the pitch a half step. But then somewhere else you still have the B flat, and so you have this B natural and B flat sounding at the same time. Some composers at that time, they got a little creative and they got really close together. These, maybe a B natural to B flat, and they just, in very close succession in different parts. Okay. And then you have composers like Guerrero or Lobo, where it happens simultaneously, and this is called either false relations or cross relations. Okay. And it's rather jarring when it happens. It almost sounds like it's wrong. Okay. Yeah. But you get this what I perceive as a very satisfying dissonance, and when it resolves, it's even more satisfying.
Wow, you've given us a lot to chew on there, and hopefully something that we can savor with the music itself. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with us that we didn't cover so far that you want people to know? Who are listening to these pieces? Yeah,
absolutely. I guess I would just say that I was saying before, I don't get to sing music like this very often. I find it very satisfying. And I think that as an audience member, music like this can be very inspiring, very awe-inspiring, especially in a beautiful space like at St. Anselm. And I have to say, I'm also very thankful for Andre, for Andre Zahorsky for making these opportunities possible. It's nice that somebody in St. Louis is, keeping this tradition alive. I think it's part of a very important part of our history, and it should be celebrated. And this is one way we can do it. And I hope people really enjoy coming to the St. Cecilia concert and enjoy the experience of hearing such beautiful music in such a wonderful acoustic.
Great, as do we. Well, thank you so much, Tristan, for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And visit our website, FRESHImage.org, to become a FRESHImage insider and have our latest resources delivered directly to your inbox.
Until next time, this is FRESHImage, reminding you that you were created to live life to its fullest,
so that you might be a breath of God's fresh, life-giving air to the world.